And we're live here at the Frugal Crafters YouTube channel. I'm Lindsay, here with Sarah today.
Hello.
And Sarah will be relaying your questions to me if you have some while we're painting along. We're going to paint a coastal landscape of a lighthouse. I can actually show you the reference photo if you didn't get a chance to take a look at it already. I thought it was really pretty, and we're going to actually exaggerate the waves and sea spray here because I had a request. I actually had quite a few requests for lighthouses. And I had just done this illustration for a book that I'm working on, and I had shown like kind of a portion of it on my blog, and people were really interested in how I did the sea spray. So I thought that would be a good lesson today. This video is brought to you by jerrysartorama.com. All of the supplies I'm using can be purchased from Jerry's if you don't have them on hand. But as always, I urge you to use what you have on hand. One of the things we're going to work with today, which I've already applied, is colorless art masking fluid. I actually recommend that you get one with a color in it, though, because it'll make it a lot easier for you to see where you applied it. So when you go around to remove it when you're done, it's just you won't miss any because it'll be really easy to see. This one's by Winsor & Newton. I've had it for probably 15 years, and I just spilled almost what was left yesterday. I leaned it down because I thought it was really clever. I broke the lid like a year ago, so the cap was broken. And any sane person would have just thrown it out and bought a new jar. I actually have two other jars, so I could have just broken into another jar, but oh no, I couldn't waste that. So I went in the recycling bin and I found a soda bottle that had a similar size cap. So I put that on thinking, oh, look at that, perfect fit. And I laid this down on my table yesterday, and it didn't occur to me that it was slowly leaking all over everything on my table. That's why you see the brown of my table, because I pulled up the paper. Everything was just like glued to my table with masking fluid. Masking fluid is a very strong ammonia smell. It stank in here so bad.
I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because I would have been.
So this is the last hurrah for this masking fluid, and I'm going to retire this poor bottle and thank it for its service in KonMari fashion. So I used a toothbrush. I dunked it in the masking fluid and just flicked it to get on the spray areas. I laid a piece of paper down to protect this like little rock area. And then I used a brush covered with soap, because you always want to soap up your brushes before you use masking fluid. And I just spread around any blobs into the into kind of the thicker wave area. So that's what I did there. And there's a kind of a diagram of that on my blog. Link is in the description if you want to go find that and check it out. Also, I want to let you know there's a big sale at Craftsy this weekend. All classes are under $20. There's a special discount link in the video description. And if you purchase any class after clicking on that link, it helps support the free tutorials on my channel, and I do appreciate it. We are going to start off by wetting the sky, and you can use whatever brush you like. I like to use a nice big one. I'm going to go with this number 30 round. And I just tacked my paper down in the corners because it is a fairly small piece. It's only 7 by 11. And I'm working at an angle today. I thought it might be a little bit easier to see. We'll see if you guys like this better or flat better. You can let me know in the chat or the comments. I like to tear down. I buy my paper in big sheets and I tear it down. I like having that kind of rough duckled edges. And I think sometimes it's pretty just to take that and instead of matting it normally, I mount it on a piece of colored mat board and then do a mat around it so you kind of see the border of the paper. And you can even see the watermark in that corner, which is, I like that. I think it's part of the paper. It makes it kind of interesting. You want to wet everything but the lighthouse in the sky. We're not wetting the rocks yet. And I listed out the colors that we're going to use in the video description. Oh, just keep in mind with the masking fluid, that needs to dry before you paint over it. And do not use a hair dryer or anything to speed that up because you could end up cooking that masking fluid into your paper. All right, so I can tip this to the light and you can see that it's nice and shiny. And I am going to let that kind of absorb into the paper a little bit while I mix my colors. And I'm going to switch to a slightly smaller brush. This is the number 12 round. Use what you're comfortable with. You can even use a flat. I'm going to use ultramarine blue. A nice big puddle of it here. And I'm also going to get some cerulean blue. And cerulean blue, and I'm not even going to clean my brush. I just need a little bit to kind of warm up that color a little bit. So I've got 2 separate puddles there. I'm going to start with the ultramarine, a little bit of cerulean up here towards the top. Cerulean and ultramarine are both beautifully granulating colors, and I think it adds a lot of interest to the sky. Add some of the cerulean in on its own too, because I think that's really nice. And having this at a little bit of an angle is going to help that color pull down towards the horizon a little bit more. We will be changing the time for the live show next week because I am going to chaperone one of my kids' field trips. And actually, all the kids are going on the same field trip, which usually doesn't happen, but it's a middle school thing. And I just signed the field trip form that came from my daughter, Lila. She was the first one to turn it in. But I told my daughter, Maisie, that don't worry, if you guys don't have any chaperones for your class, I'll just go where I'm needed. And she was, oh, no, that won't be necessary. So like what? Won't be necessary.
You know what that means? They're starting to grow up, Lindsay.
They used to beg me to chaperone.
Well, they're going to be teenagers. It's not cool to be seen with your mom anymore.
I'm a cool mom, though. I'm not one of those moms. I'm not one of those uncool moms.
You're a cool mom, like from Mean Girls. I'm a cool mom.
I haven't seen that movie.
What?
No, I haven't.
Mean Girls? It's
No.
a classic. Oh, it's great. Amy Poehler is a small part as one of the Mean Girls moms. She's like, I'm not like a regular mom. I'm a cool mom, you know, and she's got like the velour tracksuit with the word juicy, you know, and she's got her boob job and her little tiny dog that's all in an outfit, and she's very funny. I'm a cool mom.
I like her. She's funny.
Love Amy Poehler.
I'm going to blot some clouds out just with a dry paper towel. Don't rub your paper. Just want some kind of windswept clouds. Grab a fresh, dry piece of paper towel whenever you're moving around. It'll just, because your wet paper towel is really not going to do anything for you. It needs to be dry to suck up that water. And we're going to skip down to the water area, and we're going to mix a little bit of burnt umber into, oops, that's Payne's Gray. We don't want that. Actually, I guess you could use Payne's Gray, but I'm going to use burnt umber and ultramarine. See how it makes a nice black there? We do want a little more blue, but this is a nice, it's going to be a nice dark, dark, dark blue. It's really going to make our waves stand out. I'm actually going to start, I'm going to turn my paper. I'm going to start at the bottom here and work up to give that edge a little bit more time to dry before I paint up next to it. Actually, I'm going to turn it around because my reference photo's around, and I see there's some reflections of those rocks in here a bit, and I'm painting right over my masking fluid because I want that to stand up. Stand out, rather. I want that kind of darker color in close to the shore because those rocks, you can kind of see through the water a little bit, and you're seeing the dark edges of the rocks. Now I'm going to grab some yellow ochre. A little bit of burnt umber in that. If you don't have burnt umber, anytime I'm using burnt umber, just use burnt sienna. I'm going to add a little bit of that in there to reflect. Keep the excess on your palette, though. You will use that again. I'm going to grab more ultramarine blue into my dark mix. And you can, this is rough paper, so you can let the texture of that paper show through. You do not have to cover every bit. You can let the sparkle show. This is definitely, I don't know what lighthouse that is, but it definitely looks like a Maine lighthouse. Looks almost like the Castine one. icy cold water. The masking fluid makes it so we don't have to be careful about where we paint. And I can put a little bit of that cerulean in there too, because you will get some of the reflections from the sky. Not too much, because it is definitely darker in the water. Okay, now in this like little puddle here, you're going to see a reflection of the sky in a lighthouse. So I'm not going to pre-wet this because there's enough sizing in this paper that I really don't feel like I have to. I am going to grab the kind of blue mix, kind of half cerulean, half ultramarine. It's a little bit more cerulean in here. I'm going to fill in around a lighthouse. There is a traceable on my linked in the video description or on my blog, so you can print that out. I want a little darker, so I'll pick up some of that mix from the water because the reflection is a little darker. But I'm still painting around that lighthouse because I don't want to have to go in and lift it later. Add a little bit of water to my mix and spread that color around. And I'm going to grab a little yellow ochre and add that in there because you'd still see a little bit of that rock color underneath. So that mix of yellow ochre and burnt sienna can go in there too. Got to pay attention to all the different tones and colors that we see.
Joe Maskey, I've been loving the darker graphite work on the rough paper for the last 2 weeks and was considering playing that up with a pen. Is there any extra care needed than normal using a pen on rough?
It's going to chew up a pen like a micron. If you can find like a more of a stiff plastic tipped pen, you're going to have better luck. I know there's some waterproof pens you can get at like not felt tip pens, but a waterproof pen you can get like at a office supply store. They're kind of like a gel pen, but it's waterproof. I think I have one because I can't remember the make of it. I think I actually got it at Martin's, but I don't see it in here. It's a, oh wait, right here, I think. Like this one here, it's a liquid mangus rollerball, 0.7 millimeter, and by Skillcraft. And this was like in a package of 12 for like 24 bucks. I think I paid 12 because it was half off at Martin's, but it's a firm, like it's a metal roller ball. So that's not going to be damaged by the rough paper. I wouldn't use like a felt tip Sharpie or a felt tip micron because it will just wear that down really quite a bit. So just kind of keep that in mind. But yeah, that would look really cool. So now I think while I'm waiting for the sky and the water to dry, I'm going to go and do some of like the detailed cracks in the rocks here, and they'll be softened out when I do a lighter wash, but I'll just go in there with my shadows to begin with, and because that's something I can do while I'm waiting. I'm going to go in with a burnt umber. I keep grabbing Payne's Gray by mistake because I'm not as familiar with this palette. Burnt umber and ultramarine. And I am going to just put in some shadows. It should be more brown than blue, though, so keep that in mind. That looks a little blue. I love the texture of this paper. It can really give you a great rocky look. I find that building these rocks kind of in layers keeps you from fretting about them too much, worrying about them looking like rocks, because really you want to be very abstract with rocks so that you're not making them look too put there on purpose. I'm going to switch to one of the faux squirrels. This faux Kolinsky just doesn't carry as much paint. Oh, you know what? I'm going to use this this dagger. That's a really good one to do rocks with because it's got such nice long bristles and it holds a lot of paint and water. This is a Princeton Neptune. It's not a Mimic. I don't think they make a dagger in the Mimic line. You can tip it on different sides and get different widths of your line. And the best thing is you don't have to reload very often.
The baby Momo, what books do you recommend for beginners starting out with drawing and watercolor?
For drawing, it depends on what you want to draw, but for overall drawing, I'd probably recommend Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. And for watercolor, I would choose Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Watercolor or the Watercolor's Essential Notebook. I don't know. I think both of them might be from Northlight Books. You want almost like a kind of a calligraphy, not really technique, but that's kind of what you want, these kind of like graceful lines and some choppy lines. Try not to make it too perfect. And these are going to be softened as we wash over with a yellow ochre mix, so you don't have to worry if something looks too dark or too bold, because it's going to get calm down a little bit. And don't forget to put some of that dark around our waves so that we'll have something for them to contrast against.
Priscilla Ware, could you please give the full name of the Mission Gold single pigment pans?
Their pan sets are not, you can get the pans in the single pigment colors individually. I don't know. Jerry's might, I know Jerry says the tubes. I'm not sure if they sell the perfect pans or not, but the palettes, there's a 24 or 12 perfect pan palette set. I have a set of 24. I really like it, but those are not all single pigments. The set that contains all single pigments in tubes is just called the Pure Pigment, I believe, Pure Pigment, Mission Gold Pure Pigment set. Oh shoot, that's not the right color. That's not the color I've been using. This is what I want. Again, just mixing up a little bit more of this because I like to have it on hand, and I need a few more lines in here. And feel free to deviate from the reference photo if you think you want a line or a shadow somewhere. Go for it. You can drag the side of your brush along the texture of the paper to get texture, to get that like kind of speckly texture down there. While that's drying, I'm going to move on to the Lighthouse. And I am going to switch to a smaller brush. I'm going to mix up a very pale gray, and that again is ultramarine and burnt sienna. I'm sorry, burnt umber, or you can use burnt sienna, it doesn't matter. And just stick to the same brown the whole time that you've been using to mix so that your colors are harmonious. And I'm going to paint in the shadow on this side.
Doodle Sam, which brand has the best sap green besides M. Graham? Because I can't find this brand anywhere.
Well, I think I'd probably go with the olive green from Sennelier then.
Sennelier.
They make a beautiful olive green. Usually I don't like olive green because it's kind of very much like chrome oxide or a little too dead. Mm-hmm. But their olive green is extremely luminous.
Amy Livingston, what is negative painting? Is it just painting around another image?
Yep. You got it. Paint the background.
Whoops, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, you're painting the background. You're negative painting.
Julie Crabtree, what size dagger are you using?
That is a 1/4 inch, and that's probably the most useful size. The Princeton Neptunes are great, but if you can't find them or you want a cheaper version, a Royal Nanical Zen makes a dagger that's pretty good too. Very similar. I'm going to use a warm red. This is like a cad red hue. Once the pigment is PR 254, you could use a pyrrole red or a permanent scarlet, anything like that. It's just got a little bit more of a warm base to it. Make sure you don't have any beads of water on your brush. And we're just going to go in and get that top of the lighthouse there. And the little spot underneath it. My sky's a little bit wet, so just make sure if you're painting this red in here that where you're painting next to is drier. You could have it feather out a little bit.
Gracie Shack, when it comes to Arches paper, which would you say was a better option, block or pad?
It really depends on you. The blocks are more a convenience thing. You know, you don't have to tape your paper down, but if you're going to stretch your paper or you don't mind taping it down, go with the pad. It really doesn't matter. The pads are a lot cheaper. Full sheets can be a lot cheaper. I got a great deal many years ago on some 25 sheet reams of Arches, and I'm still using up that paper. This is some of it still. I got like 25 sheets for like $50, and it's now like, I think it's now about $180 for 25 sheets.
Angel 58764, what is the difference between hot press and cold press, and which would you use for different projects?
It's the texture. Cold press is kind of an all-around paper. It's in the middle between hot press and rough. Rough is the more textured, and hot press is smooth. So I think hot press, think of a hot iron. It's been ironed and it's smooth. Cold press or not means it hasn't been ironed, and rough is just like extra textural, extra rough. All right, so now we can do some washes of color over our rocks, and we're gonna start off with, I think we'll probably use a number 12 around, and we're gonna start off with yellow ochre, and we're gonna mix it in with that kind of grayish mix that we had before, and we're gonna add a little bit of red to it to get rid of any green that's caused by the blues in that mix. So we're basically getting all of our colors that we've used so far in here, which is really nice if you can do that because it gives your painting harmony. In a wash, I have dry paper where I've already put the cracks in the rocks. I'm just washing over with this color that I made. You should be going for almost a sandstone beige. And don't worry if some of the paint that you put down previously lifts up while you're doing this. It's going to give you that weathered texture that you really need. So again, at the yellow ochre, I'm grabbing some of that mix that I had before, adding a little bit of that red to it to get rid of any green from the ultramarine and any cerulean that was there. It's basically I'm making mud on purpose.
Write it down, folks. We're making mud on purpose. Usually we're trying to not make mud.
Usually. And I want to warm it up over here, so I'm going to do a little more red and a little more yellow so I get more of an orangey color here, and that's going to go in. These subtle variations will make it look natural. We're going to have some grass up there, so I'm not going to bother with that yet. And I'm going to lighten it up and cool it down by adding some more of that blue or gray mix in and paint this large portion here. So we've done rocks with tape. We've done rocks wet and wet. We've done all kinds of rocks in our live shows.
Doodle Sam wanted to ask about the most granular ultramarine.
I would say Daniel Smith has the most granular ultramarine. To lighten this up further and add texture, I am blotting it with a crumpled up paper towel. And then over here, I want a little bit darker. So I'm going to, again, ultramarine and burnt umber to get my dark. And maybe just a touch of yellow ochre. I don't want too much, just a little bit. And that is a little green, so a little bit of red to that.
Sig Fam, I was given some Winsor Newton tube paints, but they are odd colors. I love the way they work and their vibrancy, but dislike the cost. Are there similar but less expensive options?
Oh, yeah. Winsor Newton is probably one of the more expensive ones because it's kind of got that reputation of being the best there is. But nowadays, there are a lot of really good options. M. Graham is usually cheaper. And it's probably got one of the highest pigment loads on the market. So if you're in the United States, try that. Da Vinci is excellent and very, very affordable. I used it a lot when I taught. And you can get it in really big tubes if you are going through your paint a lot. But I mean, realistically, look at what you're using. Watercolor does not, you don't go through watercolor very quickly. But if you are going through it quickly, check out their bigger tubes because they have like huge tubes of watercolor available. I like Core. Core is recently been introduced by Golden, and they have introductory sets which are very affordable. And
Joey, you can't fit under the table.
The Mission Golds are good too. They've recently been reformulated to be more light fast, so you can check them out. They're super bright though, they're not as granular as like Daniel Smith or Winsor Newton can be.
The baby Momo, can you iron rough paper under a towel?
Can you? It's not going to make rough paper hot press. That has to be done in the manufacturing process. If that's what you mean.
I think that's what she means, like to take the roughness out.
No, it's ingrained. You can iron paper that's kind of buckled when you've painted on them to flatten it out a bit. I am adding sap green or olive. This is Winsor Newton sap green. You can add, because I knew I wasn't going to get a very good green mixing, and I kind of didn't realize there was so much grass in this picture. So I'll have to make a note of that in the video description, but I am adding sap green in here, and I am dabbing a little bit in, even though this paint is still a little wet, because I think it will give me a nice texture against the rocks.
Lorraine and Brian Van Hedderen, is there a way to take the waves out of the paper after painting?
Yep. You can iron it. I've done that. You're best off to prevent the buckling in your paper by taping it down on all four sides or properly stretching it. When you weight it down and you tape it down with a gummed tape to a board. But I have ironed it and had pretty good success. What I do is I put a towel down, then I'll put some put the painting down, put some typing paper over, and iron it. I usually sandwich it between typing paper and iron it on the back side, and that will take a lot of the buckles out. It's better, to prevent them, but in a pinch, I wouldn't want to do that on something I'd spent a really long time on just in case there was any issues. But I honestly haven't had any issues doing that. I just try to just tape it down if it's something I'm going to spend a lot of time on, or stretch it. Adding a little ultramarine blue in the bottoms of that grass way up here to give it a little texture. And I'm going to make a color to do down here, and I am going to be adding some of the sap green to that too, because you get kind of like I don't know if it's algae or moss or seaweed or what it is exactly, but you do get like slick green tinted stuff on the coast, and that's still wet, so we'll mix it up while that's drying. And I'll make a fresh spot here, but again, we need a dark color, so we're going to go with ultramarine blue and burnt umber, or burnt sienna if that's the brown that you're using. Mix it up. You want a little bit heavier with your brown, so you don't want it to look black or blue. You want it to definitely have more of a brown. And then we'll just tip into the green as needed. I'll also get a little bit of red at just a little dulled down red in case we need it too. And I'm going to dry this really quick. If you have any questions, go ahead and, oh, you know what? I'm not going to dry that because I have masking fluid on there. I completely forgot. That would not be good.
Good catch.
Yes, I'm going to work over here. There is like a little rim of a darker color. It's a little bit more brownish red there. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in there. It's where the edge of the puddle has made the rocks wet. So I'm just going to kind of outline that. Yeah, after my masking fluid spill, luckily I had brushes all over my table, and luckily I didn't ruin any. None of them got into the bristles except for the one I scrubbed with, a Maxine's mop, and so I chucked that in the water, and I had to run out the door because I was going out to teach a class. And when I came back, I didn't notice till the next day that I'd had that wooden handled brush in the water all night, but the paint cracked a little bit, but it doesn't look like it's going to chip off. So.
Bev Roberts, have you used Pentel watercolor pencils? And if so, what do you think of them?
No, I've never used Pentel ones. I know they have some watercolors, but I've never used the pencils. If anybody has and wants to offer their advice, or recommendation, or warning, or anything in the chat or comments, please do.
Joe is in the chat. Joe Maskey's in the chat. He might have.
Oh yeah,
he might have heard or used them.
Yeah, boy, yeah, and I love trying new watercolor pencils or colored pencils. I don't know what it is about drawing media. I just love, and watercolor. I just love trying it all. I think I'm going to be in for a big surprise when I do my declutter downstairs. I am very anxious to get going on that, though.
Well, if you want some help, let me know. I'm very good at organizing.
Okay.
And sometimes just having that second pair of eyes.
Yeah.
And I have some empty totes so we can bring over to kind of help sort stuff too.
I can pawn some of my stuff off on you.
It's all right. I did declutter my craft room less than 6 months ago, and I have been very good about not buying new things. So I feel pretty good about it.
I'm pretty good about not buying, but I do get so much in for my, for my work.
That's the thing. Yeah,
I do buy some stuff. I buy more than I need to. So, I mean, it's not like I'm innocent here.
Joe says that he hasn't used the Pentel watercolor, but he'd be interested in them because he wants to get a lower cost set for traveling.
Yeah.
Doodle Sam, interesting colors in Senlier that are not the lame primaries.
Right, looking for a recommendation, or is he making a comment?
I'm assuming recommendation.
Let's see. I like their Naples yellow. Let's see. Their violet's pretty. I'm not sure how light fast it is. Love the Sennelier olive green, like I mentioned before. I only have like 16 of their colors in a pan. I got the 12 plus 6 free. I think Jerry says it for about 60 in the metal tin. And those are the only Sennelier colors I have, except for the olive green that I bought another tube of, and then I have the student palette, which those were all really nice. So I'm sorry, I don't know that much about all of their paints. I don't tend to get too many crazy ones. I tend to buy, if I'm trying them out, I tend to try the ones I know I'm going to use. So I don't know. They do have a pretty impressive color chart on their website, though, if you want to go check that out. They just search Sennelier color chart, watercolor chart, and it's right on their website. A lot of it's in French, but you can see what colors they are. The names are in English on the chart too, I think.
KM Himes 1, new to watercolor. If a color is not light fast, how long before it fades off a card?
Well, they have ratings. There's different companies have different ratings, but they're generally will be like, the fugitive ones are going to be less than like 1 to 5 years, and good ones will be 25 years, and light fast ones will be 100 years plus. So you just have to look at the rating, and then it will tell you, and that's exposed to a moderate amount of light too. It's not like closed away in a book, and if something's closed away in a book, it'll last pretty well. Just think of like how your book covers, if you have like a bookshelf exposed to light, how the covers of your books will fade. Like children's books, the covers will fade, but if you open it up, you'll see the pages on the inside are fine because they haven't been exposed. They're just a little more fragile than other mediums because there's nothing to protect. It's the pigment's pretty naked on the paper, as opposed to like oils or acrylics where they get that nice thick binder to keep it safe.
Lisa Rogers, would you recommend Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolors and brushes, or mimic high-performance synthetic squirrel hair watercolor brushes and Senlier La Petite Aquarelle for a beginner set?
I think I prefer the Sennelier, but they're both good. You're not really going to go wrong. You can learn to mix colors with either of them. So I don't care for the Cotman brushes that much, though. They don't come to a very good, I don't think they come to a very fine point. And
I would think the synthetic squirrel would be juicier too. You tend to like a juicier.
Yeah, I do like a juicier brush. I don't know with a beginner though, because sometimes that can be a little difficult to control. I really like the Royal and Langnickel brushes for beginners, the Aqualons or Majestics, just because they have an acrylic handle. So if you forget and leave them in the water, it's not going to hurt them. They come to a nice point. They're affordable. Those are probably my beginner picks, and they'll last you, and you're always going to use them. You're going to go back to like the big, flats and the big rounds, because they're just, I use them too still, but I think they're very good for a beginner because they're cheaper, and you don't have to worry about ruining them if you leave them in the water, and they don't hold so much water that with student grade paints, you end up adding too much water, and then you're not able to get the colors as rich as you like.
Funny Dude, have you tried Kremer watercolors?
No, I would like to, though. I never have. I did email them to see if they had like a sample set or a sample kit or something that I could get to review, and they never emailed me back. They're probably like, who's this freeloader?
Angel 58764. How do the koi paints compare to other kinds?
The koi paints, I haven't used the tubes, but I have used the pans. They're wonderful. I mean, they're inexpensive. Who knows what pigments they're using? They're probably not, the most light fast paints, but as far as painting with them, the colors are nice and vivid. I have done some mixing with them and really haven't had a problem. Some people say that they can't mix with them as well because most of the colors in the sets are mixes, but I haven't had an issue with them. I take them out in the summertime to paint. I've done a lot of little postcards. I have a series called Plein Air Postcards on my YouTube channel that is just using that set and the water brush that came with it. I think it's a nice price, nice set. You can get it like in a big box store with a coupon. So that makes it very affordable. My only concern is that if you do end up making something you really love, it would be kind of a shame just because if you frame it and hang it, it may fade on you because there's no like light fast information. But as far as using them, they're great to use.
Leafa McBride, do you print your paintings and save your originals?
Do I print? No, I haven't really done any prints. I usually just sell them. But I do photograph everything for my blog at least, and I keep a higher resolution file on my computer. So, I mean, I do that at least. I've just never bit the bullet and done any prints. I'm going to take a little yellow ochre, a little smidgen of red. I want to make a warm, I don't like this being straight white. I want to make a little bit of a warm wash to go on there. Like these are cheap too. This is the Princeton, I think just basic value series, and they have a bunch of different sets, and those are really inexpensive and nice. I'd like the aqua ones because they have the acrylic handle, but as far as the quality of the brush tips, these are on par, and they're definitely a great way to get started because they're so inexpensive and they're fairly easy to find too. Princeton is sold pretty much everywhere. I'm sure Jerry's has them individually or in little sets. And I want to do that. Looks like the light in the lighthouse is kind of green, so I'm going to go by what my eye sees and do a little yellow ochre, then do a little smidgen of green after I've painted that in, I think.
The Baby Momo, what would you recommend as simple paintings to do as beginners in watercolor? I just made a playlist on my channel that says beginners start here, and I've got a basic split primary mixing video, and I've got a couple really, really, really easy tutorials that I think would be high success projects for beginners. I would start there. And if you just go to, I think you can, go to my channel and look at playlists. You should be able to find the beginner watercolor, or maybe even just search beginner watercolor frugal crafter, and
I imagine that would come up. So if my paper's dry, I can remove my masking fluid. I'm just going to I'm just going to fan it because I want to, you know what, I'll fan it and I'll show you, I'll set the reference photo down so you can see that while I fan it off camera so I don't end up, you know, hitting my camera like a baseball across the room at Sarah while I'm trying to try
that's
this.
all right. I'll try and duck. Doodle Sam, what colors are usually fugitive?
Usually it's your brightest ones, usually reds, pinks, purples, but it's more of your like really like alizarin crimson is a notoriously fugitive color, but now they have a modern version that's not synthetic. So if you see PR83, that's a synthetic, that's a natural fugitive version. If you find like a PV19, then that's going to be much more light fast. But it generally violets are not light fast. But there's been so many advances that there's been a lot of new colors made with quinacridones that are and thiocyans that are suitable and stable. So usually if you go by the vibrancy, if something looks neon, it's not going to last. Those little molecules are bouncing around too much and they're going to wear out.
Alexandra Manga, are there restrictions to using watercolor ground, like materials I can't use it on? I was thinking about painting a panel on a cabinet in watercolor, but didn't know if ground would work.
Watercolor ground pretty much makes it so you can paint watercolor on anything. That said, it doesn't mean that it means that the paint will stick to whatever you paint it on, but then it's essentially like you have paper covering that item. You can use different sealers on it. Look, if you go to the Golden website, they make that's the watercolor. What do I have? I have Daniel Smith, but I think they recommend a golden sealer to go over it. But I've painted on metal with this. I've used this when I've had a mistake in a painting and I've needed to fix it. I've painted over it and like basically made new paper, and which is really handy if you're doing illustrations for anything and a client needs something changed. But to seal it, you're going to need to use something that's durable. I'd probably recommend going over it with like Dorland's wax medium, and then you should be able to go over it with like an oil-based varnish or something that will give it some more protection, both light resistance and also like moisture resistance and whatnot.
Well, and if it's a cabinet you use a lot too, you know, the oils and stuff from your hands, I would imagine would wear away watercolor pretty quickly. Yeah, you definitely would need to seal it. But then on the other hand, you might want to actually look at like an airbrush medium or something that you can use with acrylic paints, and you thin it down with the airbrush medium so you don't weaken the bond of the acrylics, but you can get the look of watercolor by using acrylics, something that's a little bit more durable. This is a rubber cement pickup, and I actually got this. This is a slice off of one from Harbor Freight. It's called an adhesive remover. Either get a humongous one like at Harbor Freight for $10, or you can get a tiny one at the art store for a couple of dollars. But whenever I lose mine, I just ask Jason to, slice me off a chunk of his adhesive remover thing, and it works great. It saves your fingernails, and it keeps you from smudging your paint, because if you're rubbing this with your finger, your fingers will get sore, but also any oils or moisture in your hands is going to travel. Oozy Woozy, what are the different mediums used for watercolors? I see that Winsor & Newton have texture medium, art masking fluid, gum arabic, and iridescent medium. What are the different uses? Okay. So we have texture medium. Texture medium, that is basically to add a texture. There's also impasto medium, which will give your watercolors more of like an oil paint texture, like so you could put it on like a spatula if you wanted to. Art masking fluid. Art masking fluid is what we're using here. This is, it puts a barrier down that you can paint over and then remove, so you save your white so you don't have to paint around them. There's also permanent masking, which you put it down and you don't remove it. You're kind of stuck. You can't like paint over it again if you decide you want to change your mind, unless you wanted to go with a watercolor ground on top. So I only use the removable kind. And that comes in both clear or colored. And I recommend the colored because you can see it a little easier. Gum arabic. Gum arabic is the binder in watercolor paints. You can add more to your paints if you want to increase the gloss or transparency, or you want to make it easier to lift. And there's also a lifting preparation that you can paint on your paper before you start painting, and then your paints will act more like a student grade paint and you can wipe it right away. And iridescent medium. That you mix with your paints to make them shimmery. Ooh, shimmery.
Yeah, there's also Oxgal, which makes your paints flow more. Now, you have to consider that a lot of these paint companies put the perfect amount of all of these things in their paints to make them flow and behave properly. So you do not need mediums unless there's a special effect that you can't seem to get otherwise. So keep that in mind. It's not like you have to have these. I hardly ever use a medium. I mean, rarely, rarely, rarely. I am going to clean up this edge here because I want the spray behind the rock. I'm just going over chisel edge. That's a great way to use a flat brush, especially a synthetic, is to clean up an edge like this. These bristles are a little stiffer, so if I need to wiggle it a bit and mix this with the paint underneath and soften the edge, I can do that too, and I'm not going to hurt it. There's something else I want to do here, and I want to do it right off the bat before I go in with any more detail on anything, is I want to flick some of my light blues here. So I'm going to grab the cerulean with my toothbrush. I'll show you here. I've got my toothbrush. I'm just kind of wiggling it around in there. This is just an old toothbrush. I ran to the dishwasher to clean it, and then it's an art toothbrush.
Ian Jackson, would you use watercolor brushes for water-soluble oil paints?
No, I wouldn't mix them because you could use the same kind for water mixable oils, but there's still an oil in there, and it'll transfer onto your papers and stuff. So I'm just going to spritz a little bit here, and it's going to give me the it's just going to look like I've got more spray, and it's going to help that not look so stiff. So I'm just going to give a little bit of spray anywhere I feel like I've got a little too much white, and at the tops of the spray areas. What it does is more just gives you the attitude of the waves than it does actually paint them. But we're getting the impression, we're getting the mood of the piece. And we got lovely sound effects.
KM Himes 1. Do mediums affect light fastness?
They really shouldn't. I mean, some may give you more protection, but it really shouldn't harm it unless there was like an acid in the medium and that would be more of like breaking down the quality of the paint. But that really shouldn't happen. If you're using a proper medium, like something made by a company, it should be fine. All right, so I want to darken some of my rocks. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush mainly so that I don't put too much paint anywhere at this point, because we're getting towards the end and final details and stuff. So by switching to a smaller brush, it's going to limit how much paint I can put down. I also want to get those little windows in the lighthouse, which are just pencil marks right now. Make sure your shadow in the lighthouse is dry before you do this, though. And I'm going to put the little rails on the, I'm going to get the kind of little panes of the window up there, and then I'm just going to put the tiny railing coming out. Very, very light. You can skip that if you don't feel like your hand is steady enough.
Olivia W. Whoops. I think in another video you mentioned using cooler colors for floral painting. Is there a recommendation for palettes for floral painting / painters? Would the Prima Tropicals be good?
They're really good. That's a really great palette. Very inexpensive. Light fast wise, probably not the most light fast paint you're going to find, but they mix really well. And it's a really good comprehensive set of colors too. So you can definitely learn how to mix perfectly with that. If you're working in a journal, I would have no hesitation on using that. If you come up with a painting that you absolutely love, then I would scan it and maybe have it reproduced as cards, because I just wouldn't quite trust the light fastness of it, because they don't have light fast. They have light fast information, but they don't have pigment information. I feel like having one without the other I feel a little, I don't feel like it's is trustworthy. I feel like if they can give you light fast information, they must know what pigments are in there. And by not telling us the pigments, it just makes me a little leery of trusting it for something that I would hang on a wall. But for in a journal or for greeting card, I totally would. I like those paints. That's what I use them for.
J. Cliveshare 2, have you tried Besties at Jerry's?
I have the double-ended ones, and I cut them in half to make some travel brushes. I think they're a little bit better for acrylics than, well, the ones I used anyway, they felt like they were a little better for acrylics than for watercolor. I ended up sanding mine down a little bit to make the bristles a little more porous, but they're decent. I only use that one kind. I think they have different brushes for different mediums too, so that's.
Oh, we got the spot. Oh, we got the spot.
You want to darken your rocks around where the water is, because those wet rocks are going to look a lot darker than your dry rocks that are up higher and being lit up by the sun. You can pick away at that. Use different edges of your brush. If you have too hard of a line from your sea spray, you can dab with the tip of your brush, break it up a little bit. That's the only drawback with masking fluid. A lot of times you end up with some hard edges that are kind of tough to integrate and look natural. So that's why I don't use it a heck of a lot. And also because then you can't use a dryer to speed your drying, or you have to wait for the fluid to dry. So it's fun to use for this because it's very difficult to paint around sea spray. But whenever I can paint around something, I just paint around it.
JLT 110110. I don't know if all water brushes or just everyone I own, but when I squeeze the brush, the drop comes out the bristles meet the ferrule. Whoa.
I bet the water's coming out at the part where the brush splits, kind of like right there, instead of from the bristle. It comes out where it's connected.
I think that's what they're trying to say, yes.
That is so annoying. That has happened to me with some brushes. It's usually like the Niji. Is it the Niji? Not the Niji. It's not the ones that come with the koi sets. Shoot, I can't. Maybe it is Niji. It's a long-handled ones that were like the first ones I got, and that they do that, and that is so annoying. There is a little like stopper in there, a little valve in there. If you pull that valve out, then it'll flow a lot more freely, but it will leak if you leave it laying flat without that valve in there. So while you're using it, you might pop out that little black. It's a little black divider thing with a little hole in it. Pop that out and use it like that, and then put it back in when you go to put it back in your case to store it, and that will solve that problem. But not all brushes are like that. There are a few, and they tend to be my older ones that I got when the water brushes were first coming out that do that. But like I know the Prima water brushes are very inexpensive and very well performing. So, and they come in like a 2-pack for rounds and 3-pack for flats. So that's a good option if you're having that issue. Buy a set of those. They're getting better and they're getting cheaper, which is good. I think they finally figured out exactly how to make them right.
Oozy Woozy, what's the best gouache brand for starters?
I like the Lucas brand. They're very inexpensive. There's a set of 12 for like $6 or $7 at Jerry's, and I have that and I really like it. I do have some M. Graham gouache, which is very light fast, and generally gouache, even Winsor & Newton gouache, is not very light fast. So if you want something that's going to be light fast, Schminke or M. Graham are probably the way to go. But yeah, I like the Lucas. Reeves is not bad either for gouache, but I think I like the Lucas. Has a better flow to it, and it's very opaque. I'm going to switch to a larger brush. I've been adding little flicks in the water here for just a little movement. And turn that. Ooh, been quick in there. So basically, it's that same gray, but with more blue. And you can actually, with more ultramarine blue, and you can add a little cerulean to it as well.
Laura McAllister, the brushes Lindsay wants to know is by Kuretake.
Okay, Kuretake Zig. Yeah, I think that's it. Probably. Because those were probably the first ones that I got. When they were like the first people that came out with them, maybe even. But yeah, I was just having that issue the other day, and it was one of my older brushes, and I'm always rated like, gosh, should I just throw this out? I probably should just throw it out. It served me well. It's an old brush. Now, if you find you have any spray and you don't seem to have anything that would be crashing upon, then you'll want to make like a little rock. Just make your darkest color that you can, because a rock out to sea is going to be really dark because it's going to be all wet and covered with water. So let's go in and throw in a little rock there. And really, you can just kind of put her around as much as you like. I think I want to do a little bit more with the grass up here. I'm going to go with a small brush and my olive green, by my sap green rather, this is sap. I was thinking I was using the Sennelier palette. This was their olive. This is a sap. Very similar to the Sennelier olive. Might be the same mix. Different companies don't have to call their paints the same name, even if they use the same pigments. They can call them whatever they darn well please, and they do.
Hansburg Golas. What kind of brushes do you use for gouache and how much water? It seems like my Lucas gouache doesn't want to flow off the brush unless I add so much water that it's not opaque anymore.
I usually use a synthetic brush with gouache just because it does seem to need a little bit more of a push. So anything you'd use for acrylics would be fine. And it's not going to hurt your acrylic brushes to use that with gouache. It won't hurt your watercolor brushes to use them with gouache either, if they're stiff enough to push the gouache around. I like I'll show you one here, the Royal and Langnickel Fusion. They have the scraper and acrylic handles, which are great for if you forget your brushes in the water, but they're stiffer than the Majestics or the Aqualons, so they push the gouache around really well. So that's what those look like. And again, they're found in like multi-packs at, big box craft stores too. So they're very affordable and easy to find.
Ian Jackson, can Lindsay see the killer whale? I'm not sure if he means in your painting or the photo.
Killer whale? I don't see a killer whale.
I don't see a killer whale. He'll explain, I'm sure. Let's see. Angel 58764, where is the reference photo taken?
I am not sure. It doesn't say on the website Pixabay where I got it, but it does look like a main lighthouse to me. Looks almost like the Castine one.
Laura McAllister, I just bought the Kuretake water brush and I'm looking for one with less water flow. Any suggestions?
Let's see, less water flow. I find that most minis have a lot of water flow. The Prima is just about right for me. That's really my favorite. Oh, you know what? I almost find this not enough water flow, but the Aqua Stroke from Jerry's, it does not flow very fast. I prefer something that flows a little bit more, but if you are looking for something that flows not very much, go to Jerry's and look for the Aqua Stroke. They have a set of 4, I think, for about $12, and then they've got them individually for a few bucks a piece. I can't remember exactly because it wasn't. I preferred a little bit more flow with mine.
Deborah Sullivan, I need to buy some cerulean. Is there one brand that's a lot prettier than others?
I'm really liking the Winsor Newton cerulean. That's what I used. And if you look in here, it just makes a beautiful granulation that I usually don't see with other brands of cerulean. I don't use that color a ton, so I don't have a lot to go by. I don't have many brands. I don't have it in many brands, but I do like the little half pan of cerulean I have here. And probably half pans, plenty for me. So that's nice. Another alternative that's really pretty is cobalt turquoise or cobalt teal, depending on where you buy it. It's a stronger color. It does have a little bit more of a green tint to it, but it also has a beautiful granulation and texture. Daniel Smith makes a stick of the cobalt teal, which is really nice because it's less expensive than their tubes for some reason, even though it's the same exact formulation as their tube paint. Probably because they don't have to pay for a tube or a pan to put it in, I guess.
Sorry, I got lost on
that
question.
Okay.
Back up.
Adding some mossy down near the water just to give it a little life. So it's the sap green, a little bit of that cadmium red or whatever warm red you were using, it just brings a little life in there.
Ian says a whale in the water in the painting.
Here?
Yep. The black bit with the white line under it near the middle of the painting. Oh, I see where. I think he's
Right there?
Yep.
Oh, that's be a beached whale. It's a little shallow in there, I think. Poor thing.
Or maybe it's in the middle of growing some legs.
Maybe it's evolving right before our eyes. I feel like I want a little bit darker there. I'm gonna try to. Hopefully this doesn't mess it up. So you might want to watch me do it before you decide if you want to do it to your picture in case I do end up messing it up. But I feel like this should be a little bit darker. So
Mary Hadrick, what type of paper do you use with gouache?
Oh gosh, you can use mixed media paper, you can use watercolor paper. I like to use gouache in my art journal, which is a mixed media paper. It's much more forgiving than watercolor because it's opaque, it tends to sit on top of the paper a little bit more. So you don't need to, it doesn't seem to need as much sizing and it's not as finicky as watercolor, it seems like. There, I think I like that better. And I'm just deciding if I want to do anything to this little bit of.
Julie, I think you've got all the crumbs. There's no crumbs left.
Yeah, I got it. If I'm going to do anything to this spray, I just got to flick it on because it's just too delicate to try to paint in there. But I think I will switch to just a stiff bristle brush for spattering this, just because I'll have a little bit more control, and I'll do a little cerulean into that gray mix that I had. Hopefully I can flick enough on there to, there we go. Just a little softening of that. I might even be able to, oh yeah, I can dab a little bit with that too because the bristles are kind of splayed apart. There,
Great.
I think that's, oh, do you have a question?
Yes, Jamie Perlberg. I have the Prima confection tins, and when I use them, I notice crumb-like pieces in my painting. Is that considered granulation?
I think that you might be seeing if it really looks like crumbs, I think you're probably seeing some unmilled pigment. I had some people mention that with those paints. I haven't had that issue, but if a paint isn't really milled finely, or maybe production got rushed, you could have that situation. I think like their Decadent Pies. No, it's not Decadent Pies. It's the Pastel Dreams. They're a little crunchier than the other paints that they've come out with. So I would say it's probably just paint that hasn't been milled very well, or it could be extra fillers in there, but those would usually look pretty white. If it's the same color as a pigment, I'd say you probably have pigment that's not mixed in very well. I'd probably try to work it on my palette a little bit and get it mixed in a little bit better. And I'm just bringing a little bit of color onto the areas where my tape was, just to cover up those white spots. You don't have to do that. I just thought it might look nice. And there we have it. Do you have any more questions before we sign off today?
All caught up.
Awesome. I want to thank everybody for coming today. And oh my gosh, we are over 300 for
we were averaging over 300 pretty much all
nice.
hour.
Cool. I hope you guys give this little painting a try. If you've never tried masking fluid before, it's a great opportunity to do so. If you don't have masking fluid and you want to do something similar, you could always pre-paint this area with except it would be permanent. You could paint it with like acrylics in that same manner, and your paint would probably resist away from the acrylic. You could do that. Or after it's all done, you could try spattering on some acrylic, white acrylic or white watercolor to get a very similar look. So if you don't have masking fluid, don't be bummed out. Use what you have and make it work. And if you think that you would like to be able to have the ability to paint something and save your white and remove it later, then masking fluid would be a great product for you to try. Winsor & Newton one seems to last the longest. Like even with a faulty lid, this sucker has been around for 15 years, and I'm finally going to toss it because I spilled a bunch of it yesterday. I've had the Grumbacher Miskit, which I've found to not last quite as long, but I would definitely get a small bottle of it because it just, a little goes a long way. And please check out our sponsor, Jerry's Artorama, for any of your painting needs. Check out Craftsy if you're looking for some wonderful painting instructions. They have a great sale going on this weekend, and I have a discount link in the video description for you to check out, and it supports my channel, so I do appreciate that. Do you have anything to add? Are you
all set? I'm good.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.